live. Robert, thanks for coming on to Beyond.
Thank you very much for having me, Ben.
Yeah, really excited to have you. So you're the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Central Orange Coast. You've made a huge impact already, but before we jump into that, sort of take us through your earlier life, your earlier experiences, and what led you to this. Where did it all get started for you?
For me, it starts here in Orange County, born and raised here in Santana and Tustin. I didn't appreciate what I had as a kid until I became a parent. But I always had great parents at home that provided me with a good direction in life. I have an older brother that I looked up to, that I got to spend time with and kind of stay in his shadow. And growing up in Santa Ana and thinking as an adult how easy it would have been for me to have gotten in trouble, and how easy it would have been for me to kind of go down the wrong path. I look back at the strong support system I had at home. I had access to sports and after-school programs, and I had an older brother that I looked up to that was someone that I admired and
a good influence?
And a very good influence.
Yeah.
And so as an adult, I can go back and see where along the way I was able to kind of stay on the right path. And then at 18, I enlisted in the Air Force and was very excited to serve my country and to get an education. And so I figured the best way for me to do that was to have the Air Force, pay the bill for my college education.
Right.
And so I got pretty lucky. When you make a leap of faith like that, there's really no knowing how it's going to turn out and where you'll get, assigned. But I was very fortunate that I got the assignment to go to Hawaii.
That's tough.
Pretty tough assignment.
Is that where you also got your education, out of Hawaii?
So I also earned a degree from Hawaii Pacific University. And then while I was also enlisted, I earned an associate degree with the Community College of the Air Force. And it really did position me as a young adult to really look at my future through a different lens. And I don't know that if I had gone a different route, I wouldn't have ended up here. But I will say that I credit the Air Force for really helping me become the man that I am today, and to look at my core values with intention that we all as people get to interact with each other, and we all have the opportunity to do whatever we want to do with our time and with our careers. And through the Air Force, I learned about leadership, and I think the United States military is the best leadership university on the planet.
Sure.
And it's great at showing you who you are, and it teaches you these core values. And so those 4 years I spent in the Air Force, I was a member of the Security Forces unit, so we got to learn about law enforcement, security. I was active duty during the attacks on 9/11, which also changed, I think, the trajectory of my service and how we look at military service. And so after 4 years, I had spent this time learning about myself, honing in my skills as a leader, learning about leadership in a variety of different lenses and what works and what doesn't work. I also learned that I'm an entrepreneur and that I don't do very well in an environment where someone tells you what to do and kind of goes into that
granular detail. Which means the Air Force is not for you.
So I realized that 4 years was probably my max there.
Yeah.
If I would have stayed longer, I probably would not have been successful in the long term. Yeah. And so I was able to apply that energy, the lessons of really becoming a young person and a leader. And I went back to school. So I moved back here to Southern California after my service was up. I thought I was going to be a police officer. I thought my career path was clear. I was that little kid that always thought I would be a police officer. I got to do that in the Air Force, and I got to work with the local FBI and the DEA and to do some really exciting things while I was enlisted in Hawaii. And I moved back to be a cop, and LAPD had offered me a job, and I had gone through the hiring process and had really spent a lot of time and invested a lot of energy and was offered a position and was given an academy date. And it was in between that transition of me leaving one field and really starting what had been the culmination of why I entered the Air Force. And I had this moment where I realized that I wanted to be something different and I wanted to do something different. And I reflected on my experience in law enforcement and how I felt I was reacting to things. I was meeting adults that had gone down the wrong path, and I felt helpless in trying to provide some form of impact. And I realized that if I met someone earlier in life and provided them a support system and provided them mentors, that I can have a greater influence and a greater impact.
So in a roundabout way, being in the military and being in the police force of the military and seeing choices of people, right, and their decision that probably weren't always quality, it inspired you to say, look, let's nip it in the bud before they get to that point.
Absolutely. And while I was in the Air Force, I was a DARE officer. So I was a volunteer officer that would go into the schools and talk to the kids about healthy life choices. And I just realized I was more comfortable and more passionate working with young people than I was working on the tail end of crime. And so it was one of those moments that, looking back, it seemed like a smooth transition. At the time, these were those moments in life where you'd have to make a pretty big decision.
There's a lot of uncertainty though, right?
I certainly would never have thought at the time that I was debating on what I would do that I'd be working at the Boys and Girls Club, let alone be the CEO and have seen the trajectory of the organization these last few years. So during
it's
this
funny
time,
how things open up and the path is somewhat tortuous at times. But let me ask you this question. So the Boys and Girls Club have been a hallmark of many communities, I presume across the United States, providing a safe haven for kids that are disadvantaged or in tough situations, giving the ability to learn, grow, and develop their potentials at the earliest of ages. So the next question is, were you part of the Boys and Girls Club growing up?
I didn't. I had been to a couple Boys and Girls Clubs in my youth, but I don't know that I would have called myself a member. I had a couple friends in school that were members, and I got to join them as a guest. And I didn't realize that memory until I was an adult working at the Boys and Girls Club, and I was actually in someone's Boys and Girls Club and had realized that I had been in that facility when I was younger. But I was always involved in sports and programs like the Boys and Girls Club. And so I was able to see how important these relationships are in a kid's life, and how the power of mentorship has the opportunity, the potential to unlock something inside someone. And not knowing what every kid is facing, some kids need something different. Some kids are coming from an abusive household, some kids are living in poverty, some kids are, have a single family household and may not have a positive adult role model to look up to. And that's what the Boys and Girls Club is. It's that place that helps connect in whichever way it needs to connect for kids, so that they can have that place that's entirely for
What is
them.
the overarching mission of the Boys and Girls Club?
It's to be mentors and to provide champions for kids. We make it as simple as that. My belief is that I've never met a successful person, police officer, entrepreneurs, philanthropists. I've never met a successful person that got to where they got by themselves. Right. Every successful person has benefited from the generosity of other people. Someone has been along the way to help someone when they stumble, help someone navigate through life, even those cheerleaders along the way. And so that's, for me, that ingredient for successful people is that they've had mentors that have helped unlock
kind of better
that path.
together. So within the Boys and Girls Club, do you have volunteers that come in to provide that mentorship as part of the structure, or are they people that are within the organization that provide that mentorship?
The majority of what we do on the day-to-day is delivered by trained professionals. We call all of our staff mentor professionals. We hire them around a very specific profile of what makes a good mentor. It's someone with that heart of a teacher, someone that's going to invest in another person's life. There's a big difference between a mentor and an after-school program staff. And it's really the difference between a transaction and someone making an investment and showing you that they care about you.
So is the training college-based, or is it just on-the-job training for these people, or do they need a higher level of education to pursue that?
Our minimum standard is that our staff have at least 2 years of college, and then we prefer at least some experience working with kids. The majority of the staff we have a head count today of almost 175 professionals. The majority of those staff that work directly with kids are on some form of trajectory into education. So they either want to be a teacher and are earning their college degree and their credential, or someone that maybe wants to be a counselor and work with schools as you help kids prepare for their future. But what we like to hire is kind of someone that's on that trajectory, and we find them at a phase of life where they're looking for that experience and they are honing in their craft as a teacher or educator.
Now let's talk a little about the Boys and Girls Club. We talked a little bit before we came on. Talk about the size and scope. You have X number of Boys and Girls Club, but it also encompasses profit and nonprofit coming together to provide greater reach and frequency and access to these kids.
Absolutely. So I started as a volunteer almost 15 years ago. And when I walked into the Boys and Girls Club in Santana, we had one location. I think the total organization was about 12 employees, and the organization was serving about 120 kids. And so I walked in as an entrepreneur with this lens of how can we, if we know that this is having a great impact in the community and each individual life, how do we scale this? How do we grow this beyond what we're doing today? And so that started the trajectory of where we are today. So today, as we approach the end of 2019, the Boys and Girls Club of Central Orange Coast will have served almost 9,000 kids across 5 cities: Orange, Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, Irvine, and Santa Ana. Mm-hmm. And the model that we've created is it's a blend of facilities based. So we have 4 buildings that are Boys and Girls Clubs throughout these cities, but we have over 62 school-based partnerships that bring our total footprint to 66 locations. What that allows us to do is to leverage the infrastructure, the brand, the expertise of a Boys and Girls Club with the infrastructure, the brand, and the resources of a school district. And when we put all those in one pot, we're able to then use the skills and strengths that we have as independent organizations so that we can have greater impact together, or what we would refer to as collective impact.
Yeah.
So if the schools already have the students and they're already building the facilities and maintaining those facilities, our staff get to come in with specialized programs, specialized resources. So in a dozen schools in Santa Ana, we're serving kids during the school day, providing early literacy intervention. We're supporting the school districts with after-school programs, health and nutrition programs. We're on campus at every high school in Santa Ana and some high schools in Costa Mesa and Orange, providing resources to high school students to make sure that they graduate on time and with a plan for their future. Once we select the college that they'd like to attend, we help them build a custom sustainable funding plan that's a combination of financial aid, scholarships, and other funding.
Kind of a roadmap, recipe for success.
And so the entrepreneurship kind of DNA of the organization has helped us develop new and innovative ways for the Boys and Girls Club to serve the community. Most Boys and Girls Clubs are empty during the morning hours because kids are in school. We invite other nonprofits from throughout the entire community to use our facility as long as they're delivering work and mission that we feel adds value to the neighborhood. So we're teaching financial literacy to adults and English classes and Zumba, and we're preparing people for citizenship. We have opportunities for people to do their taxes and earn their diploma. And so our buildings are these full service family hubs for other nonprofits. And so as an entrepreneur, we get to look at all the resources we have and we get to invest them back into the community so that we have greater impact.
That's awesome. So you also have a campaign called Pursuing Greatness. What is that?
We did this exercise with our board a couple years ago around our vision, our core value, and what the mission would be for the organization. And so we simplified our mission. So it's to ensure that every child has a mentor and champion in life. It's to ensure that no matter what zip code you come from, what your family looks like, that you have this support system. Someone's going to invest in you. Someone's going to help provide a voice for you when you don't have a voice. And when we came down to this core value, we went through that exercise that a lot of companies go through. What are the values of this organization? And all the words that you can think of were the ones that came up. So we're passionate, and we're accountable, and we have integrity, and all these words came about. And we just finally kind of had to take a step back and say, what's the one thing that we use as this guiding compass in that North Star? And we all agreed that it was this pursuing greatness. It was this ambition for this community, this word that would describe excellence for us. And so we started using this word to describe ourselves. Are we pursuing greatness for ourselves when we do that? And is that good enough if that's what we expect for this community? And so it became this mantra of us constantly pursuing greatness on behalf of the board of directors, our staff, or on behalf of the families we serve, So when we set out to raise $7 million so we can renovate these buildings, we knew that it was less about brick and mortar and renovation and more about us investing in kids. And so we named it the Pursuing Greatness campaign. And what we felt was it's not about the money and it's not about what we will do with the money. It's about the momentum that this will build. And the way that we presented it to our board and to our staff is that we are making investments for kids that aren't born yet so that we can prepare them for jobs that haven't been invented yet. And so pursuing greatness for us is not over. We are still pursuing greatness. And, if I can go back to, living in Hawaii, there's a few words that are kind of generally used for different things. You look at aloha means so many different things. And when we looked at pursuing greatness, it has a lot of different applications for us. It's what sets excellence on behalf of the organization. It means a lot of different things, but for us in this example, it was about us sending a message to all the kids and all the families we serve that we believe in their potential and we're making a big investment into their
So
future.
leadership has a big impact and implication in any organization. When you first started with the Boys and Girls Club, it was nascent, it was small in terms of the number of their facilities and perhaps outreach. How has the Boys and Girls Club evolved over time?
As we look at that, every successful organization is constantly looking at how it can be better and how it can do more. And I think the only way that you do that is if you look internally to who you need to be in order for the organization to move forward. And so I know that as a leader, I've looked at myself and asked myself, what does the organization need of me? And then as we looked at the team of leaders around me, we ask ourselves, what else should we be doing and how else can we serve the community? So in addition to growth, I would say that what I feel is probably the most important commitment that we've made is into innovation, us committing to being innovative.
As compared to 40 years ago or 30 or 20?
Yeah, I tell people, our Boys and Girls Clubs have been around for over 100 years. Very rarely have I run into a scenario where I introduce myself and I say I'm with the Boys and Girls Club and someone says, I've never heard of the Boys and Girls Club. Our strength is that we've been around for over 100 years. Our weakness is that we've been around for over 100 years. And so it's important that we look at the strength of the institution that we are, that we have a brand that has a history and a track record, it's respected. We have generations after generations that are attending our Boys and Girls Clubs. That's such a unique story for us to tell. But at the same time, we have to look to the future and make an investment to kids that we will serve one day. So it's great to be around for as long as we have, but I want to make sure that we're known for what we are doing today and more importantly, what we will be doing tomorrow.
It's really cutting edge. In fact, I was reading that you guys are exposing kids to robotics, coding, 3D printers. You're having them fly drones. That's not the old school Boys and Girls Clubs. This is like futuristic, really giving these kids tools and probably confidence along the way.
I'll share a secret with you. The rule of thumb is what sounds cool to us as adults, what are the things that we probably would have wanted as kids, that gets its way into these clubs today. We don't have pool tables or ping pong or foosball. That's kind of the traditional model of the Boys Club. What we're looking to do is serve this generation of kids. And if we're thinking about being very intentional with just this generation of kids, they're used to consuming content at a faster pace than any other generation before them. One of the things that makes this generation of kids better equipped than any generation before them is technology. These kids are born into a level of technology that all of us as adults have had to catch up with. Mm-hmm. And it's such a unique strength that they have. It's a superpower that they have access to every piece of information that has ever existed since the beginning of time. They have access to more resources and technology than any generation before them. But there's also another side to that. This generation of kids is also exposed to a level of stress that no generation that has ever come before them has had access to. Being connected to the internet is a good thing, but it also means they're connected to everything on the internet. Mm-hmm. So if I'm looking at what we need to be as a Boys and Girls Club today, we need to understand their interests. We need to understand what they need from us. And a lot of that is going to be access to tech. Given that the majority of our footprint, 62 of our 66 sites are in low-income communities, we also have to think about the digital divide. that is as lucky as we are that technology is moving as fast as it is, and just, I mean, you buy a new device and within weeks you're already, looking at the next device.
Right.
You have to think about kids that grow up in an environment where they don't have access to technology, they don't have internet at home. And so as the world gets more advanced and
They
all
fall
these
behind.
opportunities
Right.
become greater for everyone else, they fall more behind. And you think about, at one point in our history as a country, we had kids that didn't go to school and didn't have access to a structured education, and how disconnected they were from the economy. I fear that if we don't prepare kids from low-income communities with just the basic skills, just being able to get comfortable with technology, at some point there's just going to be this stopping point where you're just not qualified to do almost any job. And so I think we have a moral obligation to make sure that all kids are prepared for the future. And as we look at communities and how diverse they are, every community has different challenges. In some cases, we're serving kids that may live in a more affluent community. That just means that the type of problems and the type of issues that they can get into are just different.
Yeah.
And so that's why it comes down to, again, we're a mentor organization.
But with
It's
all these
about that
cool things you
relationship.
offer, to me, I get the low income, I get
Yep.
the disadvantage and people that don't have all the advantages of somebody from a wealthier family. But I got to believe that the kids from a wealthier family, if they heard you have this to offer, would be very interested in being part of this. So you see somewhat of an influx of people from a...
We have, I think it's leveled the playing field. I think as you look at what we're doing, when we designed what we're doing as a prototype, and we tested it out a few years ago, we tested it out in Santana, and now it's scaled out to every program that we offer. But we didn't design different versions of it. We didn't design a Boys and Girls Club for poor kids.
Yeah, it's all...
All kids are learning how to code. They have access to 3D printers and engineering programs. They're building robots, and I think about, I think a lot about the past. I get to come in to the Boys and Girls Club and lead the organization today, and I think a lot about, how it started in the early 40s, and I think about all the people that have served before me and the challenges that they had. At some point, our Boys and Girls Club was leading with desegregation. The Boys and Girls Club was not segregated while schools were. And you look at just the evolution over all those decades, and I think about the kids today and how they need for us to be leaders and to make sure that we're representing their best interest. And so I think that these are 21st century skills. It used to be, if you were trying to become marketable for a job, you needed certain skills, right? And we all remember the resumes where you would list that, you know Word and PowerPoint and this specific software. If someone turns in a resume like that today, all it does is shows that they're disconnected from what it takes to be marketable. The new skill today is, can you learn new skills? Right. Are you adaptable? Are you flexible? Are you willing to try new things? Are you willing to learn a new process, a new software? And so as we look at the strategy for what we're doing at the Boys and Girls Club, we have drones and 3D printers and coding, not because we expect every one of these kids to be a game developer or to go into tech, but because we're conditioning them to get flexible and to work out a muscle. And I think that that's going to be one of the more competitive skills that you'll have in the marketplace, is if you're willing to be that person in a company.
You have a huge advantage.
You have a huge advantage, and that's what gets, I think, rewarded in the real world.
So when I was in the Air Force and flying, I remember we were in the flight before we took off for that day. We had 2 flights in the morning, and I remember the flight commander said, "Flexibility is the key to air power." And that the idea being that this is a contact flying day, severe, clear, beautiful, and in Oklahoma, Texas-Oklahoma border, the weather can turn inclement like on a snap, right? 2 seconds flat. So you may have a contact flying mission, but if it goes inclement weather, cloudy, thunderstorms, whatnot, you got to have the flexibility to change your flight profile.
Yeah.
So the idea of giving this to kids is really, really important. And I like it on a couple levels. It teaches them flexibility, and maybe it gives them a touch of something they've accomplished. Mm-hmm. And maybe it gives them a sense of belief in themselves. And maybe it's an inflection point where they say, you know what, if I can do that, maybe I can do this and this and this. Because ultimately, life's between your ears and what you believe, right? And certainly people can speak in your life negatively or positively, but you guys are a force for good. So that brings me to the next question. With such a powerful impact on kids, what kind of support are you getting from universities or corporate sponsors?
What makes the Boys and Girls Club operate. The machine for it to move is driven by philanthropy, by corporate giving, by other nonprofits. Not to be the cliche guy, but this is a village coming together, saying that kids are important, and what drives us to do what we do is people believing what we believe. And I got to tell you that if we were a Boys and Girls Club and we just said we were a Boys and Girls Club, we're going to get some support from people that want to just support because we're the Boys and Girls Club. We do good in the community. The reason I think people support our Boys and Girls Club and are investing at the level that they invest, whether it's with time or with money, is because they're investing in a vision. We believe in the potential of kids in this community. We believe that the school system is doing so much to prepare kids for the future, but there are gaps that exist. There are skills that kids need to develop before they make it to adult life. A high school diploma doesn't mean what it used to mean before. And so I think people believe in that, and they recognize that if they invest in organizations like Boys and Girls Club, we're able to bring the arts, we're able to connect kids to technology, we're able to provide relationships to kids that will ultimately lead to a stronger, better Orange County. I also, as an entrepreneur and as an optimist, I choose to be an optimist. I see the bright side of things. I see the potential in things. So when I see, low-income kids, I see the opportunity for us to help them overcome those obstacles, and then for them to become resilient, and then to go out into the market and come back to the community and change the community. We look at technology, and we've spoken a lot about technology, but if all we did was just teach technical skills, we are not preparing kids for the future.
Teaching life skills through technology.
It's character, it's confidence, it's leadership, and we work a lot with local companies here in Orange County, and some of those tech companies will tell us, it used to be when we were in high demand for these technical skills, we would hire anyone that knew how to do those skills, right? Because it was such a limited workforce, and we were fighting to get people that knew how to code and knew these technical skills. No matter who they were, no matter if they were awkward or if they were difficult to work with, they had a skill that was in demand. Nowadays, that skill set is a lot more universal. A lot of kids are learning these skills. So now these companies are a lot more selective to, yes, you know the skill, but how well do you work in teams? How well do you collaborate? How well do you use critical thinking and strategic planning? And so all these other soft skills are more
do you have
important.
companies showing up with engineers and donating their time to show them the construct and how they think about product development?
I wish I could tell you that I'm the smartest guy in the world, but what I've learned to do as a leader is to surround myself with very smart people. So the way that we've developed a lot of our initiatives is by bringing in the for-profit experts, have them develop the strategy or the mentoring component. So a lot of tech companies and a lot of local companies are involved, integrated into our day-to-day experience, and we expose our kids to different careers and take them to different career visits. But a lot of what we developed is us going to the market, seeing the gaps that might exist, or tapping into their expertise and bringing that into the organization. And universities are a big component of that. It's important that we prepare all kids for a college education. There's a lot of debate on whether or not everyone should go to college, and for me, it's just let's prepare all kids for that. And if they choose it's not their path,
I kind of look at it differently. I think casting a vision is 9/10 of it.
100%.
If you don't have a vision for your life, you're toast, right? Especially in this era. You got to have some vision. If the vision is, I don't have an expectation to graduate from high school, or when I do, it's here versus here. What you're doing is saying your potential's here. If you choose to be here, you could do that. But let's cast a vision for what it could be. I think that's a beautiful gift.
We really are lucky in Orange County to have the number of community colleges and universities that are all surrounded by us. And as I use the term college, it really is this bigger lens of higher education. How do we prepare kids for some form of higher education, whether that's a trade school? I'm a big advocate for what I'm seeing right now with like these 3-month coding boot camps. Someone goes in there, can cross-train essentially in 3 months, qualify for an entry-level tech job. And so I just believe that you can't get by with a high school diploma and then just have options waiting for you. Those days are gone.
Well, hopefully it captures or casts a vision for these kids so they're motivated to do and be and have more in life as they go forward. But all this takes money, right? All these great ideas and the drones and digital printing or printing, whatever you guys work on, it all takes money. So I know last year you raised $7.1 million for the construction of the facility. So you have these state-of-the-art facilities, and then you raise in addition to that another $5 million. So I got to thinking, you know, I'm in a startup business where it's all about raising money.
Yep.
You're a very successful, you know, person at raising money. That's not easy to do. Almost, what was that, $12 million last year in 2018. So talk us through a little about that process, because every year you have an operating budget to meet and a plan. You have commitments to kids and communities. So how do you go about raising money for a nonprofit?
I think the first thing that we do is, you know, as an entrepreneur, I look at the lens that a donor would use, right? So if a donor gets approached by different organizations with the opportunity to support their mission, they have to make a decision on what to do with that money, right? So if they only have so much to give, they have to be very intentional with who they give it to and why. Mm-hmm. So I give to organizations, including the Boys and Girls Club. So I use the same thought process, right? I want to put my money here because it's going to do something that I want it to do. And so I look at it as a CEO of the Boys and Girls Club as the responsibility to invest every dollar that we raise the same way that a donor would if they were investing it into different organizations. So our annual budget is a little over $5 million. So I look at the year ahead through this very simplistic lens of how do I invest $5 million next year so that it has the most amount of impact in the community. And the majority of what we do is people. Our staff are the mentors. So the majority of our budget is people mentoring kids. Mm-hmm. But I always use that lens. I don't look at it through that kind of that charity mindset of, well, we did it last year, we do it again this year. I look at every single dollar as a tool. How do we invest
constantly
that
evolving
dollar?
Strategy and the impact.
And if you're looking at it as a startup entrepreneur, you're looking at it the exact same way. You have a limited number of dollars. How do you put the dollar in the right place so it can do the most for you? We invest in programs and strategy that we know are going to have profound impact in the community. Everything has to be result driven. Everything has to be measured. Everything has to have some form of result, or else I'm not being a good steward of the funds that people have entrusted me with. The other piece, the $7.1 million that we raised for this Pursuing Greatness campaign, was an investment into facilities, technology, equipment, furniture, so that all of our clubs, our 4 clubs, were 21st century Boys and Girls Club experiences. So they all have a makerspace. Every makerspace has the 3D printers, the drones, the robotics, and whatnot. So it was almost 12 months of us testing different programs and different equipment and different technologies, and figuring out which ones were the ones that were having the greatest impact. What equipment was lasting us the longest? What was having the kind of the greater effect for kids and their interest level? Mm-hmm. So we beta tested a lot of small things, and once we realized that this specific platform of robotics is not only, you know, standing the test of kids and is actually, you know, lasting, mm-hmm. but the kids are having those light bulb moments over and over and over. So that's what we're going to buy more of, and so that's how we looked at. I mean, every detail, to the lighting, the chairs that kids were sitting in. We tested over 30 chairs and had them, you know, had the different manufacturers send us chairs and had kids sit in them to figure out what was the most comfortable chair. If they sit in boring, uncomfortable chairs all day, why would they sit in those types of chairs when they're in the Boys and Girls Club? Sure. So we put a lot of thought and planning into what we would invest in. And then as we looked at the buildings, you know, we could have demoed the buildings and just built all new facilities. It would have cost us 3 or 4 times as much money. Instead, we looked at the footprint that we have at every location, and we redesigned the floor plan. And just by moving a hallway and a room around, we were able to increase our capacity to serve more kids. So every one of our buildings now can serve more kids than we did before. And then it's all the stuff that no one ever sees, but it's, you know, internet and Wi-Fi repeaters and, you know, better electrical power to the facility, all those things, so that the investments will serve kids for the next several decades. And they just happen to look brand new and fun and exciting. But this is, for us, an investment into kids and an investment into the community.
And we got some B-roll of your facilities, and they're state-of-the-art, they're amazing, they're beautiful. I mean, if I was a kid, I'd love to go there when I was a kid. I mean, what you're working on is interesting. So how does the future workforce affect the way you think about designing the Boys and Girls Clubs? Because you mentioned you're doing things for kids that aren't even born today. Yep. And you know, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of headwinds for the future jobs. I mean, with AI, there's a talk about displacement of lots of people. So are you working with companies or organizations to sort of see what the future is going to be like and how you can tee up the Boys and Girls Club to, partake in that future and plan ahead for, what you offer based on what it's going to look like?
I'm fascinated with technology and AI and where the economy is going. How the economy looks today and what it will look like tomorrow is certainly embedded into the strategy of the Boys and Girls Club. And I speak often about the future and innovation, not just in nonprofit, but kind of in general and disruption. And I think about unemployment. We're seeing a low unemployment right now, but when we look at unemployment across the country, we have unemployment not because we don't have jobs available, but because we don't have people that are skilled or qualified for the jobs that are there. And when you speak to the average small business owner and you ask them what their biggest pain point is or what they lose sleep over, almost consistently it's filling a position. They either post a job and they can't find the right fit, or they have a hard time keeping the right person in that role. And so I listen to that. I work a lot with for-profits and collaborate and learn from them. And I look at that and I think about how we prepare students through the traditional education system for an economy that doesn't exist anymore. The traditional school system prepares kids and teaches kids things that they will never ever use, and they also don't teach them things that we expect them to know. And so that's why it's so important that organizations like Boys and Girls Club come in and add value to what's happening during the traditional learning day. And that's why STEAM and all these interactive experiences for kids put kids in a different perspective. We've had this shift over the last few years where for several years we looked at the Boys and Girls Club as what picked up as soon as the school bell rang, and how can we help them with homework and keep them off the street. And that worked for a long time, and it was certainly something that we should be proud of. But today we can become so much more. And as we look at the role as innovators and us testing new equipment and bringing in new initiatives, it's because we feel that kids need these support systems and these experiences. Parents want their kids to have access to these types of activities. And so for us, we've now positioned ourselves to think about how can we add more and more value and add a greater level of enrichment to what kids are doing during the traditional school day. And so that positions us to try new things and to bring in programs like Toastmasters, where kids in second grade are putting together a speech and giving that speech in front of their friends. Yeah. I think that every kid should learn to be an entrepreneur, not because they should own a business someday, but because I think entrepreneurship is a 21st century skill. So we developed our own curriculum, Startup Kids, and our kids in third grade are putting together their own pitch in a Shark Tank format and kind of giving their presentation as what business would they launch if they were to launch a business. I don't think that we're doing this because everyone's going to be an entrepreneur, everyone's going to go into software.
It's giving them touches, giving them exposure, giving them experience.
I think creativity is a superpower, and the thing about kids, young kids, is that they're very curious. They ask you a ton of questions. I have a 4-year-old at home right now, and she's in that zone. She's just asking every possible question she can think of. The kind of question she comes up with, I can't imagine me sitting down and writing that question out. And then as they grow up, adults kind of suppress that curiosity and have them more conform. Boys and Girls Club is the headquarters of curiosity. That's been our
So why
strategy.
stop at just technical? Why not bring in medical and other disciplines to really inspire, enlighten, make aware?
We do. We have a program called College Bound, where we expose our high school students to every possible career that is out there.
But I'm talking kids.
The kids have access to teachers, police officers, nurses, doctors. The idea is that we're exposing them to all these different resources. The reason tech is integrated is because tech is the window to these opportunities. So, you walk into the Boys and Girls Club and you'll see every kid with their iPad or a Chromebook out, and they'll be on the USC website, and we're going to do a virtual college campus tour. We're going to talk about what it takes to get into USC, what does campus life look like, what type of degrees could you earn, and then what type of careers could you go into. We can use that same device and do a trip to Paris and learn about a different culture. And so these devices are portals that allow us to explore, to research, to create. And so all these things are tools for us to expose them to. But there is no one career, there is no one college, there is no one platform. What we try to do is really
You're planting a seed.
plant
Maybe,
seeds and disrupt the environment for
So
them to ask questions.
what do you hope these clubs, what kind of impact would you want to see these clubs make in the next 20 years and the students you come across?
That's a great question. I get that question a lot. If this is what we've done in the last 5 years or last 10 years, what's the next 5 or 10 years beyond that? And my answer is, I don't know. I don't ever want to know. I want us to always be evolving. I want us to always be looking for new initiatives, new programs. I don't know what devices will exist. I don't know what careers will be, exploding in the next few years. I just know that if we're constantly focusing on the bridge between where kids are and where they can be, whatever goes in between will always be good. I do know that whatever it looks like today is not what it will look like. It's just a constant evolution. And if you look at the successful companies on the for-profit side that we look up to, Amazon, Netflix, all these, innovative, Apple, they don't look the same year after year. They're constantly growing, evolving, and redefining. And so I put us into that block. We're always in that mode, and it's because we define success not based on a destination, but based on the journey. We're always on that path, and I think the day that we get to the point where we feel like we got there, we're done. We're now at the kind
path
of
to greatness.
Yeah.
So let me switch gears. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
That's such a great. I was 25 when I first walked into the Boys and Girls Club as a volunteer. So first advice would be stick around. This is going to be a good ride.
Yeah.
When I walked in, I was going to spend 3 weeks as a volunteer. That was my original thought, but I was 25 years old when I walked into the Boys and Girls Club. I did not know what I know now as an entrepreneur and being around in this organization. I don't know that I would steer myself in any other direction than the way that it's happened. I was 28 years old when I was appointed as CEO, and if I can look back, I was arrogant. I thought I knew what I was supposed to be doing. I probably shouldn't have been appointed to that role, but I needed to learn what I learned the way that I learned it.
Yeah.
25 to 28, I was director of operations, so I really needed to focus on the mission of the organization before I can go out and truly represent it. I think 25-year-old me, maybe to enjoy the ride a little bit more along the way. I think in those early to mid 20s, you're just so focused on getting stuff done, and you kind of get to do that as a single person that only has that obligation. But I think I was very lucky to be surrounded with great leaders before 25, that I got to really perform as a 25-year-old ahead of my time. I was given an opportunity that I don't know that I would have gotten had it not been for my previous background and all the resources I had. I give advice to young people, and that's kind of the same format. What advice would I give myself when I was 18 as they're about to go off into college? And my advice to them is always, you're going to have the rest of your life to work and commit yourself to a career. Enjoy these years, especially as you're in college, because there's so much pressure under college students. Enjoy this time, enjoy your relationships. You'll always look back at this time of your life and the people that you knew, and so always appreciate those moments. And so I guess for me, it's always those experiences.
Great advice. Who's the person who's had the most influence in your life?
Depending on where I am in life, I've had some really influential people. During my military career, I had access to some really good leaders, and I had some really bad leaders, and so you learn as much from them as you do from anyone else. And so during those years, that Air Force experience, I think, helped hone me in as a leader. And then in my experiences at the Boys and Girls Club, I've had access to leaders that run other Boys and Girls Clubs or work in this industry. I had a few board members that kind of took me under their wing in those early years and helped me tremendously as a young leader. My childhood is my parents again and my older brother. My older brother was my and he's 5 years older than me, so having an older brother that's 5 years older is someone that you look up to. And
Sure.
I think we had enough distance away from each other that he didn't see me as a threat, and I really had an opportunity to look up to someone that wasn't making bad decisions and kept me in line. These last few years, my wife and we have a 4-year-old and a 10-week-old at home, and so I think family creates a different lens for you. And I started at the Boys and Girls Club as a single guy with no kids, but just this instinct for what kids should have. I now have a lens as a father, and we speak about it from a culture perspective on the board and on staff, that we don't have a separate set of rules for our own kids and the kids we serve. So if I have a standard from my own 2 kids, it's the same standard that I would have for the kids we serve at the Boys and Girls Club. So if I don't want my kids sitting in a used couch, then we don't accept used couches. If I don't want my kid using an old device, then we don't have old devices here. If my daughter's sick, we take her to the doctor to get seen and treated. So if there's kids at the Boys and Girls Club that are sick, we help connect them to healthcare. We have a clinic at the Boys and Girls Club. If they're not doing well in school, you're going to get them tutoring. And so for us, it's how do we maintain those same expectations? And I feel as a leader, my tone sets the pace for everything. And so we have the same standards for the kids we serve that we do at home. And if you don't agree with that, then you don't get to be around. You don't get to be on the board. You don't get to be on staff because your influence is too great to have that magnified.
Cool. Where can they learn more about the Boys and Girls Club?
We were one of the first Boys and Girls Clubs with a website. So we are www.boysandgirlsclub.com. Okay. And on that website, it provides access to the locations we have, the different initiatives that we offer, how to get involved either through volunteer service or by giving or joining one of our giving societies, or just learning about more about the impact and sharing that with people in the community. And if there's a different Boys and Girls Club in your community that's not my Boys and Girls Club, I would encourage you to connect with that Boys and Girls Club. There's over 4,000 Boys and Girls Clubs in the country. We're the largest youth organization in the U.S. They've been around for over 100 years. And we're serving 4.5 million kids across the country. And so if there's another Boys and Girls Club, connect to your local Boys and Girls Club, because every kid deserves a mentor and a champion in
100%
life.
agree. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks
for
you
coming
so much,
on.
Ben.
Enjoyed
really appreciate it.
Take care. Awesome.